So, The Amateur is a spy thriller in which Rami Malek plays a very intelligent CIA, someone who wants to be at CIA on a revenge path. Now, I think, this is the film that I kind of want to champion because I love the fact that Malek's character of Charlie, who more or less works within like the CIA as more of an intelligence guy than an action guy. He kind of becomes like the unlikely hero in this type of film because basically like he plays his character whose wife dies and he wants revenge on the people who did it, and he believes that the CIA isn't going to help him and that he's just going to have to go on the run and just ends up going on this revenge quest. I think the film has a good angle going for it with that, but unfortunately, the big problem with The Amateur is that it does fall back on a lot of typical spy thriller tropes and moments, like the whole angle of having his wife, played by Rachel Brosnahan, when she dies, she reappears throughout the film in kind of like, like a ghostly form, which is not new for these type of like revenge thrillers to hallucinate, your dead spouse. There are some decent emotional moments for him when Charlie, Malek's character, realizes that his wife's dead. He does have some fairly good emotional moments there, but I feel like this film, like, it fluctuates between, having this very, having a little bit more of an intelligent vibe for how it plays up this type of character. But on the other angle, it just, like I said, it just falls into the typical tropes. It has like the dead wife, visions coming back, the dialogue in between scenes, and setting up exposition is not that great. Like, a lot of characters just kind of give a little bit off performances here. Like Malek's character I can understand, but it's so many of these other characters here, like Lawrence Fishburne, who's playing more or less a mentor who tries to teach Malek all about tries to teach him that if you kill somebody you can't undo it. But unfortunately, like, this is a speech that I've heard in other action thrillers many times, and Fishburne just kind of goes through like the motions there, even though he has a pretty decent fight scene in this film. There are also like other characters that he'll befriend along the way who kind of like help him out, and some of them are like morally ambiguous, they're hesitant to help him, and some might turn on him, and some might offer him help that he might refuse, and some will just end up dead as they keep going along here. So yeah, it's a lot of like familiar staging for like this type of like a spy thriller, typical globetrotting stuff, some decently shot chase moments for intensity, and a few fight scenes here and there. But I wish it didn't, because like where this film works best is when it makes this character of Charlie more of an interesting killer. Like when he targets the various members of this terrorist group that were responsible for killing his wife. I liked how he used like pollen at one point to take advantage of someone's allergies to kind of like, give them a fighting chance before he might kill them. There's also probably one of the best moments in the film is when, it basically, threatens this guy by launching him off a roof in this like glass pool where he uses like water pressure just to kill this guy, which I found fascinating. It's like, okay, I'm kind of digging on this. Here's this guy who doesn't think he can kill, and he's using all like his tactile smarts here to try to get his way up to like the person who was responsible for killing his wife. And I do like that angle as well, like having him, contemplate like revenge and death as he goes along. I admired that about the film, but unfortunately it falls like back on all these like typical platitudes. Like there's hardly any room for Charlie in this film, where it just feels like he's just delivering like the most like basic lines for what he's meant to feel here, that I don't think it gives his character, like, I don't think it gives much of any character for anyone within this film that's very tightly packed with a lot of familiar elements and a little bit of subversion here. Not enough, though, I think, to sustain it, because like I said, I like the idea of having this very smart guy go on like the spy thriller instead of a muscle-bound action hero, but unfortunately the film just never achieves takeoff speed with that. Like, it keeps building up, I start getting interested, and then it just kind of like plateaus the more that it keeps going, and then it goes down with my interest in like the acting and some of the writing here, especially since like there's a lot of like wheel turning moments here where it just feels like the CIA training that Charlie gets is like so brief in the film that it's it's just it's weird like how quickly everything happens here, and to a degree like I kind of dig it. They do set up some pretty neat stuff for Charlie to do, but as the film goes along, there are a lot of like just like left field surprises, and I can't help but feel like that's almost to like make up for the fact that there are a lot of components of this film that don't work. Like there's not as much personality, like there's not enough of like a leaning in to the smarts of this character, or even like his turmoil for his wife. Like it's mostly just reserved for these hallucinations, which just they get the point across decently, but it never really feels like you're bearing the full weight, the big, both like emotional and like the philosophical weight that this character should be having. That it just kind of feels like he's going through the motions when it really shouldn't, because there are some pretty cool chase scenes here. Like I love the big pool death that happens, and Malek's performance here is fine, especially for like a character who seems like very like lasered in on like his goals. Like it kind of like reminded me like a little bit of The Accountant, which we have another sequel to that film coming up, but yeah, like I kept wanting this film to be a little bit more, because like it's not a bad action thriller, but like you can see the potential there for more. You can see like you can just add just like a little bit more humanity, a few more smarts to a lot of the chases and the traps here, and then you'd have like a really cool spy thriller that's able to like rise above like the usual types of films in this genre. And unfortunately, it comes so close, and I want to like champion the film on having that kind of like brain versus brawn thing and being a little bit different than other spy thrillers, but it only ends up being just a little bit like an extra coat of paint on the same type of vehicle that it's been before. So I was rooting for The Amateur. I really do. I wanted to have that kind of like underdog spy thriller, but it's still bound by a lot of the limitations here. So not quite a negative recommendation. Just it needs a little something more. Like I think if you love like action spy thrillers in any form, and you don't care how repetitive they are, you'll probably be entertained by this. But if you've seen all of them, if you want something a little bit different, you're going to be a little bit disappointed by how this film just kind of falls back on the typical tropes and doesn't really do much new with them, despite how much like kind of fertile ground it could explore here. So yeah, the Amateur ended up being a little bit disappointing.